Hey, what is up, everybody? Jack here with DevSlopes.com, and welcome back to DevSlope Southern Command. Today, we're going to continue on our journey in our API course. Now, the first part of this course up till now, with the exception of the code along, has been about JavaScript basics. Today, we're getting into the meat of what this course is really about, and we're going to start building out our RESTful API. So let's go ahead and jump into some code and get started. The first thing we've got to do is set up our project folder and skeleton. Okay, so I'm going to make a new folder here on my desktop, and I'm just going to name it Restaurant API. And to start with, we're just going to do a simple restaurant API. And we're just going to have like a name of the restaurant. And then later on, we're going to add in some complexity and refactor this. And possibly, right now I'm thinking we might turn it into a food truck API with geographic coordinates. That way, when you go to your favorite food truck, you know, they move around, you can add a pin to the map of where they're located at currently. And add reviews and that kind of thing. But for now, we're just going to start off with restaurants, and it's just going to be real simple. We're going to get the basics down, and then we'll refactor and add in some complexity. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull up a new terminal window here. And I'm going to change directory into our folder we just created. Okay, so we've got just a blank empty folder here. We're going to go ahead and run npm init to get our project skeleton set up. Now, the name can't have caps in it, so we're going to have to change that. And we'll just make this version 0.0.1. And we'll put in a description. Entry point we'll leave alone. Test command leave alone. We'll leave all this alone except for author. Okay, so we've got our package.json file created. Now let's go ahead and let's open up a new Atom window here. And I'm going to add a project folder. We're going to navigate to that folder we just created. Restaurant API, I'm going to add that. So here we've got our package.json file. And we've got our name, version, description, main. Now, I need to change this main. If you'll remember, we're going to set this up to use Babel. And the way Babel is going to work is we're going to have two folders. We're going to have a source folder, which we'll put all of our ES6 code in. And then when Babel transpiles it, it'll put the transform code into a folder called dist, or short for distribution. So we're going to, for our main, we're going to say dist. And we'll leave test alone. Author and license are all fine. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now that we've got our package.json file here, we need to install some npm packages. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a new terminal window here. Or actually, we'll reuse this one. And make sure I'm in the right directory. And then we need to install a few things. So we're going to install, and the way we're going to do it is just say npm install. And we've got two class of packages here. We've got dev dependencies and dependencies. So we're going to do the regular dependencies first. So I'm going to put a -- save here. And we need to install Express. So Express, let me just pull up the web page here. You can see Express is a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework for Node.js. And it says right here under the APIs on their homepage, with a myriad of HTTP utility methods and middleware at your disposal, creating a robust API is quick and easy. So Express.js is just a framework that's going to help us build our API. Really does save a lot of time in creating an API. So we need Express. We're also going to need Mongoose. And Mongoose is, let me pull this back up. We're going to look at Mongoose. It's object modeling for Node.js, MongoDB object modeling. And Mongoose makes it extremely simple to interact with a MongoDB database. And you'll see once we start building out our API, it really cuts down on a lot of complexity. And the last thing we're going to need for our regular dependencies for now is something called body-parser. And here's the GitHub page for body parser. It's basically Node.js body parsing middleware. So it's going to let us parse incoming request bodies in middleware before it gets to our handlers. So when we make a request from either, say, Postman or from a client application, that request is going to have a body. And in our case, we're going to be sending JSON. Well, body parser is going to allow us to parse that object and turn it into something we can use in our application. So that's the ones we need for regular dependencies for now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return, and we'll let these install. Okay, so now we've got those dependencies installed. Let's take a look at our package.json. And you see here under dependencies, we've now got body parser, Express, and Mongoose. Now there's some dev dependencies that we need to install. And dev dependencies are just dependencies that we need during development. So to install those, I'm just going to type npm install --save-dev. And what we're looking for here is we're going to install NodeMon. And I introduced you to NodeMon earlier. It's the package that lets you run Node, and then anytime there's a change, like if you save a file, it'll restart the project so you don't have to keep killing the process and restarting. So we need NodeMon, and we're going to use something called ESLint. And what ESLint is, it's a linter for ECMAScript. So it's just going to let us know if there are any errors in our syntax. And then we're also going to need Babel, which I've already talked about. But for Babel, we need a few packages here. We need Babel-CLI. We need Babel-core. We need Babel-ESLint. And then we need a couple of presets for Babel. We need Babel-preset-ES2015. And we need Babel-preset-stage-0. Now these presets will add the configuration in our package.json file, and that just sets Babel up for our environment to be able to transpile ES6 code down to ES5. So that's our dev dependencies that we're going to need, and we'll go ahead and hit return here and let these install. Okay, so we've got our modules installed for development. Now we need to turn our attention back to our package.json file. And with the ESLint, we need to install, or we need to put a code or a block in here in the configuration to configure ESLint for use. So down here, actually, I'm going to put it up here under scripts. I'm going to put a space here, and we're going to create a new top level key here, and we're going to call it ESLint config. And we're going to put a new block in here, and we've got to put a comma here so we can continue on through the file. So in our ESLint config, we need a key called parser options. and that's going to have another block inside of it. Inside of our parser options, we need a couple of values here. We need ECMA version. And we're going to set this to 7. I know we're on 6, but we're going to go ahead and leave it on 7 just for future use. And for source type, we need to set the value to module. You don't necessarily have to understand everything here, but these are just the options we need to pass in for ESLint to work. And then we need a comma here after this curly brace, and we're going to add another block here. And this is our ENV or environment block. And we just need one thing in here, and that is node. We need to set that to true. That's just letting ESLint know that we're going to be in a node environment. Okay, we need one more block, and that's going to be rules. Now, in our rules here, we need a couple. We need one called no console. We need to set that to 0, which is the same as false. We need to turn that off because we are going to be, if we set this to true, we wouldn't be able to use console.log to log information to the console. Since we're using node, we want to be able to log things to the console. So we need to set that to 0. And then we also need to set no unused vars to 1. Now that one's kind of optional, but I like it because if you ever do a refactor and you forget to rename a variable somewhere, and that variable's just kind of out there orphaned, it's not being used for anything, that could be a source of bugs in your application. No unused vars, if we turn that on, then that will catch it before it becomes a problem. So we can go ahead and save this. Now we need a configuration for our Babel package. The way we create a configuration file for Babel is we create a new file, and we need to create it on the top level here. And we need to call it .babelrc. Okay, and inside BabelRC, we just need a few things. We need a block in here, and then we need a key of presets, and then we need an array for this. And here we need ES 2015, and we need stage 0. And these are just Babel presets that it's going to look for. And that's really all the configuration for Babel that we need to do. So now let's turn back to our package.json file, and we can start adding in our scripts here. So I'm going to add a few here, one for development. So we'll have a development script, and we'll set a node environment variable here equal to development. And then a space, and then we'll run nodemon -w source, and that's just going to watch the source folder. That's going to watch the source folder for changes. And then we need to issue a --exec, and then for execute, we want to put a escape character with quotes there, and then we need to run babel-node source, and then we need to specify our presets here. ES 2015, stage -0. And then we need another escape character and a quotation mark there. And then we need a comma because we're not done. Alright. So if we run npm run dev, it's going to execute this block, this line right here. It's going to set up an environment variable for development, and then it's going to fire off nodemon watching the source folder, and then it's going to execute this right here every time there's a change. And babel-node is basically going to transpile our code on the fly and enable us to run it. Now we also need a build script. And build, what this is going to do is if we run npm run build, it's going to transpile our code from the source folder to ES5 code and put it in the dist folder, which if you'll remember up here is our main, is our dist folder. And this line looks like Babel source -s-d capital D dash small d dist presets ES 2015 comma stage 0. And that's all for that line. Now we can pull Babel up here. We could say Babel dash help. So we've got some switches in there. We've got the -s, we've got the dash capital D, and the dash small d. And if we scroll through here, we can see the -s is the source maps switch. So it's going to map our source. And then we've got -d is copy files. The capital D is going to copy files. So it's going to copy from the source folder, and then the small d specifies the output directory. So it's going to copy to this directory. So we're going to map the source, copy the files to this directory. So that's what all those switches in Babel are for. Okay, so let's do a pre-start script, and this is a very simple one. It's just going to be npm run-s build. And all that's going to do is it's going to actually run this one here and compile our code or transpile it and get it ready to start. And actually I skipped one. We need a start here. Now start is the one that's going to get us fired up for production. And the way we're going to set this one up is we're going to do another node environment variable, and we'll set it to production. And I'm going to do pm2 start dist. Now we haven't installed pm2 yet. We will in a future video, but pm2 is a process manager that will basically watch Node and make sure it's running. Kind of like NodeMon, but pm2 is for production. So that's going to be our line here is we're going to set the environment to production. We're going to use pm2 process manager to start, and then we're going to start from the dist folder. All right, we've got our pre-start, and we're also going to have a lint script here. And for lint, we're just going to do ESLint source. And if we run npm run lint, that's just going to let us check our syntax and make sure everything's okay. So that does it for the scripts. We've got our ESLint config here. We've got Babel, our Babel configuration file here. Let me just look and make sure there's nothing else we need to add here. So I think we've got everything set up. So we could run, yeah, there's our Babel RC. Now we don't have our source folder yet, so we can go ahead and make that. So we can make our source folder. And we don't have any code in here yet, so we need to go ahead and add a couple of things. So inside our source folder, let's go ahead and right click and add a new file. And we'll just call it app.js. And this is going to be our main application file here. Now we don't have any code in it yet. We could go ahead and put an import statement in here. So we'll just say import import express from express. And if we've got everything configured correctly, if I do npm run build, we see here that it runs and it copies app.js to the dist folder. So now we've got a dist folder here, and you see we've got this app.js and this app.js.map. These map files, they're just JSON files basically. If I pull up my browser here, we can read about them. Source maps are JSON files that contain information on how to map your transpiled source code back to the original source. So if you've ever done programming in a compiled language like Objective-C, you can think of source maps as a JavaScript version of debug symbols. So maybe that will help understand just a little bit what they are. You don't really need to worry about them. But anyway, back to our main point is Babel is working. We just did our build, and let's see, let's go back and look here at our scripts. We've also got lint. Let's see how that's working. Okay, so if we run our lint, we see here we've got one problem. We've got one warning, and the warning is that express is defined but never used. Well, that's because in our app.js file here we imported it but we never used it. So the ESLint is just a checker to make sure things look okay. And then we could do pre-start. If we do that, that just basically builds our application and copies it over to dist. And then we've got our dev. We can do npm run dev. And it transpiles on the fly. Now we're getting a crash here because we don't have any code in here yet. So we can go ahead and stop this, and we'll go ahead and build it out in the next lesson. But anyway, all of our scripts appear to be running okay. So let's go ahead and move on to the next video, and we'll actually start adding some code and getting our API, the beginnings of it anyway, up and running. So we'll see you over there.